Hi, I'm Dave Cullimer, and welcome to another segment of Veterans News. We have some mail today that I think is important, and I think you would like to know the answer to these questions that we got. So without further ado, I'm going to get right into reading the correspondences we've received. First, a veteran from Seattle, Washington wants to know, how can I increase the money I get now for my knee condition? And I'm assuming that he's receiving compensation from the VA. We'll go on that premise. He's already receiving compensation. So, assuming the condition has worsened, the best way and easiest way is to get a current diagnosis, send that with a request to your VA regional office for a reevaluation for your service-connected knee condition for increase. It's that simple. That's the best way, the easiest way, the quickest way. Hopefully, that's helpful to you. The next question comes from Orange, New Jersey. My husband and I were separated. Can I find out how much money? My husband and I are separated. And this lady wants to know if she can find out how much money her veteran husband receives. The answer is yes. You can find out the amount of money any veteran receives, but you must have identifying information, such as his Social Security number or his VA claim number. The reason that information is public is because it's public funds that generates the money for the Veterans Administration, and so if you can identify him, the VA will tell you the amount of money that a veteran receives. And our next correspondence is from Chicago, Illinois, and the question is, why does it take the VA so long to process my service injury claim? Okay, again, we're going to assume we're talking about a service-connected disability for which you've applied to the VA in order to receive compensation. Several reasons extend the length of time for processing. One, if the VA has to go out and request medical information, that's one reason. If correspondence to the veteran is not received and returned promptly, if necessary, that also extends the length of time for processing. 3, sometimes to get the records necessary to show the injury occurred in the service also takes a long time. So those are 3 answers right off the top of my head as to why it could take a long time to process the claim. There are many, many, many other reasons that are particular with each claim, and we won't go into all of them, but those are some of the basic reasons for the length of time it takes, in addition to the volume of work the VA has to do. And our next question is from Atlanta, Georgia. Can you explain what a clothing allowance is? Yes, I can explain what a clothing allowance is. It's an allowance of $600 and change awarded once each year in August for veterans who have service-connected disabilities awarded by the VA, who wear a prosthetic device, meaning a brace or are in a wheelchair or have some type of prosthesis that tends to wear the clothing out because of the rubbing of that prosthetic device against the clothing. And the $600 is to purchase new clothing. It's payable once a year after you apply to the VA for that clothing allowance. But if you have, for instance, a skin condition that requires a cream or a salve that tends to soil the clothing, a clothing allowance could be payable in that situation, but it's to replace worn clothing because of a service-connected disability. I hope that answers your question on the clothing allowance. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Stay with us. Hi, I'm glad you stayed with us. We have a couple of more questions that are very important I think you'll enjoy and get some interest out of, which is, this is from Tempe, Arizona. How can I get the VA or get VA Vocational Rehabilitation? The Veterans Administration does provide vocational rehabilitation. However, a veteran must be service-connected with a service-connected disability and receipt of compensation in order to get voc rehab. In other words, voc rehab is only affordable if a veteran is in receipt of compensation for a service-connected disability. And it's simply a matter of applying to your regional office, simply indicating you would like to have vocational rehabilitation. And that's how the ball gets started in order to get voc rehab from the VA. Hope that helps. I think I hear something.
Hey, David.
Hi, how are you, Rick? How you doing?
Good to see you.
I heard you were working next door.
Yeah, we're building a new set over there for one of the new shows. It's a show coming up called Step to the Plate that the network's going to be doing.
I just realized you're a vet and you're a Vietnam vet, Rick. How do you like that? All this time I've been knowing you.
Really?
Didn't even know you were in Vietnam. Same as
Sure
me.
I was. Yeah.
Son of a gun. Small world. All right, guy. Okay, it's good seeing you.
Yeah.
I'm glad you stopped in.
I just was listening to that last question you answered. Good stuff you're doing here with these questions.
Oh, hey, it's, the least we can do.
Very important.
The least we can do.
And, while we're on the subject, I got something in the mail, a month or so ago, and I saved it. Cause
that's Agent Orange stuff.
I knew you were doing this show.
Right, okay.
And here's a question I've always asked myself about Agent Orange, having been in Vietnam. I was in 3 Corps in 68 and 69.
Okay.
And I have to think that my question must be a question that's asked by a lot of other veterans. 2 things. Does the VA or does the government have some kind of a chart, a map, some kind of pictures or scheduling that says when Agent Orange was used and where it was used?
Absolutely. It does exist, yes. In the early days, when I was a counselor at a vet center, we used to have physically a map of of Vietnam.
Right.
And we had dates and times for the map as to when spraying occurred. Later, in later years, the last 3 or 4 years, I had a monitor overlay showing the areas that were sprayed. So yes, it does exist.
Right. So if a veteran had inquired to the VA, he could have got that answer.
Yes.
So that's it. So
right.
What do you think it would take for the network to get such a map and such dates, and we could air that on your show, either on your show or on my show on 11 Bravo?
I don't think it would be difficult at all.
Because I mean, here I am, 30 some years
later
removed, and I still don't know.
Right. Well, one of the things, Rick, I'm not sure of the reason for your question, but let me say this. It's not necessary that a veteran prove that he was in any particular area at any particular time in Vietnam. If he contracted any illnesses or injury or diseases as a result of Agent Orange, there's no requirement for proof in most of the cases.
As far as area and time where
that is correct. That's no longer required. In the old days, it used to be required he had to be in a certain area at a certain time, and they had the dates and the times and the maps of the spraying.
Sure. Well, then maybe it's just my own personal curious-minded
Yes,
work.
but it is available.
But I'd like to see a map that said, okay, and then I can say, I was there, and I was there during that time. So I could have been exposed. Or I could look at that map and say, no way, I wasn't even close.
Absolutely. That'd be great.
And I'm sure that might be going on in a lot of other vets' minds. Was I there? Was I exposed? Was it possible?
A lot of the nurses, the 7,000 nurses that were in Vietnam, would like to see it too, I'm sure.
I'm sure they would.
Great question,
Yeah. Why don't we, between the two of us,
look to get that map.
Let's look to get that map and that info, and we'll put it on the air.
That's great, Rick. I'm glad you stopped in.
Yeah. Hey, listen, while we're at it, here's another one. Now, on the back page of this notice, page 10, and this was dated, there is no real date here.
I think they come out quarterly.
Oh, here it is, sure. Here's the cover. This came out April 05.
Okay.
So it's been sitting on my kitchen counter for about 6 months, like a lot of stuff does. On the back page 10, I'm sorry, page 10, is the, Mike, can you come in on that?
Sure.
What this is It's the VA rates for disability.
Right.
It gives a chart
Right.
for with non-spouse
Right.
and with spouse.
Right, okay,
And
very good. That's great.
The figures are a little bit different if you have a spouse, or a little bit more for the monthly payments. Let's start with veterans with spouse only. It starts at $363 a month
Correct.
if you're 30% disabled.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, give me a typical example of somebody that's 30% disabled.
Okay.
What would be wrong? What kind of problems would that person have?
One, he could have both ankles at 10% and a slight hearing loss
At 10%,
at 10%.
which adds up to 30.
Right.
So it's not necessarily one particular wound or injury.
Or it could be.
It could be.
Certainly, it could be jumpers.
Jumpers, but it could
Have
be
bad
added up.
knees and bad backs,
Okay.
just typically.
Right.
Sure, it could be a piece of shrapnel.
Okay. Let's jump ahead.
Sure.
Ahead a little bit. Let's say 70%.
Right.
Now
Okay.
that pays with spouse $1,147 a month.
Right. Okay.
Give me an example of what would be wrong with a person that is 70% service-connected disability.
The first thing that comes to mind is post-traumatic stress disorder. Because PTSD, as it's commonly referred to, does not rate in 20, 40, 60, and 80% percentages. It's 10, 30, 50, 70, and 100.
So it's kind of like odd numbers.
Yes, kind of like odd
Until
numbers.
you get
So
to 100.
That's correct. And what that kind of means is if there is an increase warranted in that particular disability, the increase has to be at least 20% for an increase in money to be payable by the VA.
Gotcha.
So a lesser percentage in a different disability that has every percent payable doesn't mean the increment doesn't have to be as great in those conditions. But for here,
Right. Okay, so a person that's 70% disabled based solely on PTSD.
right.
How incapacitated would that person be as far as employment, being able to perform
Fairly minimally.
professionally?
It would be a tightrope to keep a 40-hour-a-week job for a guy that's 70%. He could do it, but there would be some real energy necessary
Right.
for him to maintain a 40-hour-a-week job.
Is it fair to say that somebody that's 70% disabled as a result of strictly with PTSD probably couldn't hold down a normal job?
Yeah, that's a good summation, because it's very, very, and I'm thinking of the maximum capacity for a person to hold a job, and it would really be strenuous.
At
Because of
70%,
all of the things that a person is impacted with, it would be very, very difficult.
Okay, so that person is then receiving $1,227 a month.
Right, now that's the married rate.
That's
or
the
for,
married
for a
rate.
spouse and the veteran, right.
And and interestingly, I'm sorry, I gave you the right number there. $1,147 a month for 70%.
Okay.
As opposed to the non-married rate, no
Right.
dependents, of $1,056.
Right,
Which would equate to $50 a week
Right.
difference
right.
between married
Right.
and unmarried. Wow. Now, David, come
Yeah.
on now. Now, I've been married to two different women for, almost 30-some years.
Not at the same time, though.
Not at the same time,
Okay.
thankfully.
Yeah,
But I have a little problem here with
Right.
not you, but with somebody telling me that a wife only costs you $50 a week.
Rick, if I had a quarter for every time a guy says to me, how does the VA expect me to live on that kind of money?
Yes,
I could have retired 5 years ago.
I'm sure you could have, yeah.
But so it's about what the law says. All of the monies that are paid by the VA, Department of Veterans Affairs, are dictated by congressional laws. Yes, and it isn't a matter of an individual's personal income or lack of income that dictates the amount of money a veteran receives for compensation. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Okay, and now let's look at 100%.
Okay.
If you're 100% disabled, let's come up with a couple of examples there physically.
Okay.
You probably lost both legs.
Both legs, sure. A paraplegic would be 100%.
Okay.
Sure, loss of sight.
So 100%. Now we've got. I mean, geez, I did an interview not too long ago with a gentleman. I'm sure you know, Bob Wheeland.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
He's a
Yeah.
double amputee.
Right. Went
No
all around cross
prosthetics,
country.
a wheelchair, but he walked across the United States on his hands.
Right, I remember.
Great story. We had a great interview with him. Mm-hmm. But not everybody's Bob Wheeland.
Right.
That's a double amputee.
That's correct.
Right. And I don't think America has any right to expect everybody to be a Bob Wheeland
Exactly.
who has been a double amputee.
Correct.
Okay. So you know where I'm going, don't you?
Yeah.
You know where I'm
I
going.
think I do.
$24.29 a month. $2,429 a month. Let's call it $2,500.
Sure. Round it off.
Which works out to a little over $600 a week.
Right. Okay.
A hair over $600 a week.
Right. Mm-hmm.
For some person who lost both legs in a
Right.
war defending this country.
Right. Not a lot.
No.
Not a lot.
It's.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost choke when I read that.
Yeah.
And when I say choke, I mean I can feel the tears in my eyes.
Right. Yeah.
And we're at the mercy of it's not the VA's making these
No,
rates.
the Congress.
No, the Congress.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So there it is. I mean, that's what it is, folks.
Congress.
We're hearing it right here. Here it is. If you didn't see it the first time, Mike, zoom in on it again.
And that's where the laws come from.
100% disabled veteran
Right.
gets just a hair under $2,500 a month.
Right.
Dave, I know that you talked about SMC on your show,
Right.
special monthly compensation, and how that adds money to the equation. But to me, these folks should be getting like $10,000 a week.
Right. What can I say, Rick?
What can we say? We're just doing our job here, and
You know what Abraham Lincoln said, Rick?
I bet you would know, Dave.
I do know. Abraham Lincoln said, "To care for him who has borne the battle, and his widow, and his orphan." That's what Abraham Lincoln said about the care of veterans.
Good job.
Yeah.
Dave, I really enjoy your show.
I'm so glad you stopped in.
Yeah, I want to interview you on 11 Bravo. one of
Hey,
these
you
days,
got it.
You know.
Anytime.
Yeah, Vietnam,
65, 66.
66.
Yeah, one tour.
One
Yeah,
tour.
Yeah.
Helicopter.
Helicopters, old H-34 reciprocating engines.
Oh,
yes, love that
yes.
airplane.
Yeah,
Love that
yeah.
helicopter. Knew it like the back of my hand. Yes.
Great stuff.
Great stuff.
All right.
Yeah. Rick, it's a pleasure.
Always.
All right. And please come back again for another segment of Veterans News. This is Dave Culmer.